You almost shit your pants on a show the other day, Kaufman.
Came real close. It was an hour-long show. I felt it coming at the midpoint, and I was like, man, this is gonna get dicey. And then there were, what was it, Mike? Or actually, no, it was Tyler that was producing. There was 5 minutes left, like 5 minutes left in the show, and it was like, all right, it's coming now. so it's either, yeah. How about now? Oh yeah, we call this a Jufro. That's what this is.
Oh yeah,
this is very relatable for Greg. He has sported this.
Did you see the picture I posted?
I did, actually. What's up, everyone? Thanks for hanging out. Of course, double dose of me today, and I mean, you get plenty of Greg every single day, so that's always a good thing. Greg Ehrenberg, I'm Adam Kaufman. We already talked a little NBA earlier today. Jock Market. This time around, this is the Yahoo Wednesday Night Live show, and we, much like earlier, have 13 games to look ahead to tonight. We got about a half hour to do so. We'll go position by position, all the good stuff, obviously. What is notable, though, Greg, just sort of eyeballing this thing, looking at the Yahoo projections that we have on our site, that of course we always encourage people sign up for even a weekly passive NBA and just check out Awesemo Plus and all the different tools that are available to you. We have 18 players right now, and this could change, obviously. We're still hours from lock. 18 players right now that are projected for at least 40 points tonight. And that's what happens, obviously, when you have 26 teams in action. Who stands out to you most? Who do you like best?
You mean in terms of which high-end player or just
the studs? Yeah.
All right. So let's see. If I'm going through the studs, the one I have the most exposure to is Kyrie Irving. The reason being, he's not priced correctly on Yahoo at $35, especially when you consider that Kevin Durant's out of the mix. And remember, it's not all that long ago when he first came back and made his debut with the Nets this season, where we were doing a show together, and he was only $22 when he came back. People didn't want to roster him at $22. There was uncertainty. What's his role going to be? What's his playing time going to look like? He played 32 minutes right off the bat, and in competitive games, he's playing a ton, which kind of makes sense when you think about it, too. They don't have to save him for anything. They kind of go out with Kyrie on road games. He's only playing basically every other day. He's playing in road games. He's not playing in home games. Now you also have the situation with Durant out where you just figure, maybe they lean on Kyrie a little bit more in these road situations than they will on Harden, knowing they're going to have to lean really heavy on Harden in home games right now. 38 minutes for Kyrie last time he was out, and he was averaging 1.35 fantasy points per minute last year when Kevin Durant was off the court. There's no reason to think that situation is going to be any different. So he's not priced like a true stud, but he really is at $35.
Well, and like you said, I mean, that's the big thing. He's $35 here on Yahoo. He's one of those guys projected for north of 40 points tonight, sitting about 42.5 at this moment. Like you said, no Kevin Durant. So it's he and James Harden that are going to be getting the bulk of that work for Brooklyn. And at $35, I mean, he's such a value compared to all those other studs. I'm just looking at it right now. He's among that upper echelon that I referenced earlier. He's certainly the cheapest. I won't say by far, because Nick Vucevic, and some of the injuries that are there for Chicago. He's $36. You have 38 for DeMar DeRozan, 39 for Pascal Siakam, also 39 for Rudy Gobert, who's in a great spot, much like it feels like everybody else for the Utah Jazz tonight. But all of those guys, far cry from, Nick Vucevic, Nick Jokic is at $56. Same for Giannis Antetokounmpo. LeBron James, probable. We expect him to be out there. He's 55. North of 50 or at least 50 for James Harden. For Joel Embiid is $50. Luka Doncic is $50, who's not projected to be nearly as good as some of those other guys that I mentioned tonight. Is there one of those studs in particular, maybe Luka's the guy, who's more of a fade, more of a stay away from spot for you?
Ooh, all right. So let's see. Let me sort by the most popular guys. And because, it's easy enough to say, don't play somebody who nobody's rostering, but let me just sort by a projected ownership and which guy am I underweight to. It's picking up a bunch of ownership. It's kind of the way Yahoo breaks up, though. None of them are that popular. So we've got Kyrie Irving's projected to be in about a third of the field's lineups at 33.6%. I don't have any issue with that. Then you go down. The next most popular stud on the slate is Vooch at $36. And that's only 15% of the field's lineup. So it's hard to really call anybody an outright fade when none of these guys are all that popular. Like, I really do think the optimal way to go about building lineups on Yahoo today is it really is a lot of guys that are just underpriced in the mid-range, a la Kyrie Irving that we talked about before, because while he should be a stud, and he kind of is, he's not priced like one. And there are a bunch of guys like that I think make a whole lot of sense on Yahoo. And, we're going to be talking about some of these Jazz guys. Rudy Gobert is another pay-up option I think makes a whole lot of sense. And you just got these other guys, D'Anthony Melton, Mike Conley at $22, Bogdanovich at $19. A whole lot of guys make sense to me in that teen to $20 price range. I think that's really where we should be building a lot of our lineups around.
Yeah, looking at some of the ownership projections that are available to you on the Awesemo website, you mentioned D'Anthony Melton, Jordan Clarkson, one of those guys for Utah who's in a great spot tonight. Cheaper guys, obviously, neither one of them even remotely close to $20. They're both projected anyway to be in just about 20 or 50% of lineup. So heavily rostered. Kyrie Irving, he's third on that list at about 37, 38%. Terrence Davis, Rudy Gobert, some of those guys that are up in the 30s as well. Bojan, not to be confused with Bogdanovich. Bogdan is out tonight at last look. Bojan is obviously going to be available. So there are a ton, obviously. And like I said, we'll go position by position. Hit the like, hit the subscribe button if you're watching along on the YouTube site. If you're watching along on Twitter, wherever you're finding us, you have any questions, get them in, because like I said, we're here with you for about a half hour. So we've got you for another 20 plus minutes. Also wanted to make sure that we shout out our good friends at Yahoo. We'll do that in just a little bit as well. But we thank them for, of course, partnering with us and making shows like this possible here tonight. So let's start at the point guard position here, Greg. And let me see. Best guys as far as the opportunity for tonight, those that jump out. Like I said, you've got LeBron James, who's point guard eligible, obviously. James Harden, Trey Young, who's in a really good spot. DeJounte Murray, Luka Doncic, John Morant, who's going to be popular tonight. List goes on from there. Kyrie Irving, obviously. It would seem to me guys like Young, Murray, Morant, these guys are probably the ones that stand out the most outside of obviously Kyrie as a cheaper guy in this mix. But who do you like best among the studs at the point guard position?
Yeah, so to me, it's going to be De'Aaron Fox, so a couple of guys, if we're paying all the way up. James Harden, for some of the same reasons we just talked about with Kyrie Irving. Although on a points per dollar basis, I'd rather play Kyrie Irving, who's a shooting guard on Yahoo, at $35 than James Harden at $51. Both of them certainly strong options without Durant, but my preference is not to play Harden and Kyrie in the same lineups. And if I'm picking between the two, Kyrie's more of a priority for me on Yahoo today. So on the high end, Harden would be one. The other one's De'Aaron Fox. There's no Tyrese Halliburton in the lineup for the Kings. So that just creates extra opportunity for Sacramento, both in terms of playmaking and usage, and a little more security with De'Aaron Fox's minutes as well. Not that they're necessarily going anywhere, but I think there's a better chance in a competitive game that we see De'Aaron Fox play, upwards of 38 plus minutes, just because they don't have that other facilitator on the court alongside him in Tyrese Halliburton. Also, Halliburton's had the ball in his hands a ton over the last month, and he's kind of actually been the primary point guard slash distributor for the Kings. And De'Aaron Fox has to take back that role now that Halliburton's out. So Fox is the one that I have the most exposure to right now at $32.
You've got some interesting pay down guys tonight, guys that are cheaper in really good spots. Some of the names we've already mentioned, Mike Conley, obviously, who you shouted out before. There's Jordan Clarkson, DeAndre Melton. Now that, we're getting, it feels like more and more guys getting ruled out from Miami. Tyler Hero earlier today entering health and safety protocols. So that puts a guy like, Gabe Vincent is in a better spot than obviously he originally was. You make a case for Detroit for Saban Lee if you wanted to as well. So who are some of these cheap guys that jump out at you?
Yeah, so it's pretty hard to ignore the Utah Jazz guys. Mike Conley is $22. Jordan Clarkson is $17. Two of the best overall value plays on Yahoo on a points per dollar basis. Donovan Mitchell's in the concussion protocol, and we've talked about all the guys who have been in health and safety protocols. I can't remember somebody who's had a concussion this year, but with Donovan Mitchell out because of the concussion, there is so much playing time and usage that opens up for the Utah Jazz. And as a result, if you look at our ownership projections across all sites, DraftKings, FanDuel, Yahoo, you've got the Rudy Gobert, Mike Conley, Jordan Clarkson, Bogdanovich, Nichols. These are the most popular plays across the industry on pretty much every site, but for good reason. It's a massive void to fill for Utah. And this isn't a team typically when somebody's ruled out, whether it's Mike Conley, Donovan Mitchell, Rudy Gobert. It's not a team that all of a sudden says, oh, okay, we're just going to play, 10 guys in the rotation, or whatever. They kind of just keep the same guys in the rotation and condense it. And then you've also got no Rudy Gay. He was ruled out earlier. This is going to be a pretty tight rotation for the Utah Jazz. A little bit of concern that this game could become a blowout because they are very big favorites against the Houston Rockets, favored by 12 points. But it's really hard for me to see anything other than them finding success against the Houston Rockets. And with all this usage available, Conley, Clarkson, really high priority plays.
Among the shooting guards, and like I said, if anybody has any questions, get them in. We appreciate it. We see our buddy Bracken in the chat with the Jazz avatar as well. Says, play all my Jazz tonight. Was Chris Smith says no on Clarkson. It's a fade stud day for him. I don't know if Clarkson's a guy I'd call a stud, especially when you got so many available to you tonight. But we'll see how this all plays out. I get it. The Jazz in general are going to be very, very chalky tonight. And you don't want to screw up, depending on how many lineups you're building anyway. But if you're just putting a couple together, most people, if you're trying to sort of keep up with the Joneses and you're playing Jazz guys, it's not going to be good for you or for a lot of people if even one of those guys winds up busting. But going to the shooting guards here, and in many cases, these guys point guard eligible as well. Kyrie Irving, LaMelo Ball, Jaylen Brown, Fred VanVleet. You got Bradley Beal, Anthony Edwards, D'Angelo Russell. The list goes down from there, obviously. I'm not sure, though, any of these guys, I know we talked about Kyrie, but the guys that, more kind of shooting guard specific, a lot of these guys, I'm not sure any of them is in one of those sort of super chalky must play spots, among the studs anyway.
Yeah, none of them really for me. The only guy who's a high priced option that I'm getting to in more than 10% of my lineups in my Yahoo build is Kyrie Irving. So there's nobody else that I think that you really have to look at as an expensive shooting guard play. And also looking at the salary, the only players that are priced above $35, the shooting guard position, Donovan Mitchell, he's out. Paul George, he's out. Bradley Beal, who I don't really necessarily love getting to Bradley Beal in general when this team has been healthy. It's been an underwhelming fantasy season for him. So there are no high-priced options to really consider at shooting guard. Kyrie Irving's $35. Your guy Jaylen Brown is $35. That's not that expensive, though. So it's not really a position where you could say to spend up because there's nobody to spend up for.
What about some of these cheaper guys? Again, that's relative, sort of, pardon me, mid-tier and below. Like we talk constantly about Jordan Clarkson, obviously mentioned Bojan Bogdanovich in that Utah game as well. DeAnthony Melton, you mentioned him earlier. He's going to be popular. He's in a really good spot. But then you have like Joe Ingles, also part of the Jazz, Kevin Huerter, Max Strus, another one of those guys who's elevated with the injuries. No Kyle Lowry and obviously no Tyler Hero there for Miami. Lonnie Walker, you could look at John Conchar in that Memphis-Milwaukee game. So who do you like among some of these pay down guys?
Yeah, so at shooting guard, to me, the cheap option that's going to be the most sensible and also the most popular is DeAnthony Melton. And this just gets back to a health and safety protocols issue. We look at the Memphis Grizzlies and their injury report right now. There's no Kyle Anderson. There's no Dylan Brooks, although he's not in the health and safety protocol. He just has an ankle injury. But Desmond Bane, he tested positive for COVID. He's going to be out for the next week or so. Tyus Jones, he was somebody who early in the day I was doing the strategy show with Adam, And he had said, I think Tyus Jones could be a pretty good pivot off of D'Anthony Melton. We don't know exactly how the Grizzlies are going to allocate their minutes. Sometimes Tyus Jones ends up being the guy who they like to play alongside Ja Morant. Well, guess what? Tyus Jones is out now. So there's really nobody else for them to give minutes to off the bench here other than Melton. I mean, like Conchar's still going to play minutes. We're going to see minutes going to Jared Culver now probably. But here are the available guards for the Memphis Grizzlies tonight. Ja Morant, D'Anthony Melton, John Conchar, Jared Culver. That's it. Just those four guys. Melton's always been a really good pointsman and fantasy producer, but the minutes aren't always there for him. But with the Grizzlies being so thin, they have no choice but to give him minutes. So D'Anthony Melton, pretty clearly one of the top value options today.
Want to shout out our friends at Yahoo Fantasy. We've partnered, obviously, with Yahoo Fantasy throughout this NBA season to bring you some great offers. You can check out our exclusive limited time offer. Gets you 1 free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. To qualify, you need to be new to Yahoo. Sign up via the link below. Deposit and play. It's just that simple. Yahoo will then send us your name after you play in your first paid contest. We will get you all set out. Reach out with an email to get your coupon. If you need any immediate access, that works. Email support@awesemo.com. We'll get you set up there as well. You can claim a free $10 of site credit by clicking the link in the video description below, which can be used to enter any Yahoo contest, including the $50,000 NBA Baller. That is tonight or this weekend's $500,000 NFL Wildcard Baller Saturday and Sunday. Of course, that right behind us here, we got the divisional round on the way and opportunities available to you. Make sure you use our DFS tools and projections designed specifically for Yahoo to give yourself the best shot at winning big. So we encourage, obviously, that you do so. And once again, we thank you for hanging out here with us about halfway home on this show. So if you have any thoughts on tonight's slate, questions, whatever it may be, let us know. And we are happy to try and help you out. So let's move over to the forwards here. Look at the small forwards in particular. And again, some intriguing options that are available. You could look at, let's see, obviously there's LeBron James. We assume he's going to be out there. Jimmy Butler, we were talking about him being elevated in a better spot. Jason Tatum as well. You mentioned Jaylen Brown. Tatum is certainly an appealing guy, but obviously you got to pay up a little bit there. Chris Middleton, Anthony Edwards, Kyle Kuzma is a guy who is not maybe garnering enough respect for what he's doing there with the Wizards as he should be because of, sort of the Lakers, I don't know, residual stank that still exists there from his time with LA. Who do you like here for this small forward position?
Yeah, so if I'm paying up, the guy that makes the most sense to me is Jimmy Butler. He's the guy on the high end I have the most exposure to. I don't necessarily think he's a must to pay up for, but it's a really favorable matchup against the Portland Trailblazers team that's shorthanded right now due to all the guys that they have out, especially the big man position. No Larry Nance, no Cody Zeller. So Nurkic has had to play massive minutes. But the other thing, too, about Jimmy Butler just stands out. No Kyle Lowry, no Tyler Hero. So that means right there we're looking at increased usage for Jimmy Butler, potentially a couple extra minutes, and then extra playmaking opportunities as well. So Jimmy Butler on the high end is the one that stands out the most to me. There aren't that many small forwards to pay up for either. It's kind of weird. A lot of the guys who are pay ups are kind of gathered at the same position today. We look at small forward. Tatum's $42. Jimmy Butler's $41. Just like we talked about shooting guard position, there's nobody else over $35 at the spot. So paying up is Butler over Tatum for me.
As far as paying down, like Terrence Davis, I mentioned him earlier. He certainly stands out. He's in a great value spot. He's $13. He's, real close to the minimum. Obviously, you could pay, look at Devin Vassell. We've talked about him in past shows. He's in a good spot for the Spurs tonight. Kessler Edwards at the minimum for $10. He's a guy you might want to look to for the Brooklyn Nets. Who do you like as far as the value?
I'm not quite on high as Terrence Davis as everybody else is. I project him for a little bit less minutes, and his minutes have been super, super volatile this season. And that's also something with him being a chalk play. I kind of like getting away from a little bit. I like pivoting and getting to Marvin Bagley, who we talk about when we get to power forwards. Mm-hmm. So Terrence Davis played a bunch of minutes last game, started in place of Tyrese Haliburton. I think there's a pretty good chance that happens again. But also keep in mind that Marvin Bagley was out last game. And I think we could see the Kings play more traditional big lineups with Rashawn Holmes and Marvin Bagley together, Bagley and Metu together, Metu and Holmes together. So I think that could pinch the minutes of Terrence Davis a little bit. And I think the most likely scenario is still that he ends up getting the minutes. But just from a tournament perspective, considering how popular he is, I like the pivot of getting to Bagley instead. So Bagley right now have projected to be in less than 10% of the field's lineups, whereas Terrence Davis is projected to be in 32% of the field's lineups. So I don't think that Tavis is a bad play. I just don't like him as much as the field does. Some other value plays that I do prefer to him. I like getting to Bojan Bogdanovic. He's sub $20. Same reason we're going to like every other Jazz guy here. No Donovan Mitchell. There's a lot of opportunity to go around in Utah. DeAndre Hunter, no Clint Capella, no Bogdanovic for the Atlanta Hawks. So once again, a situation where Atlanta's probably going to have to play more smaller lineups. And then also extra minutes on the wing without Bogdanovic there. So Hunter makes some sense, Bogdanovic, and then John Conchar, same reasons that we like D'Anthony Melton. There's a reason to like John Conchar as well. Talked about the Memphis Grizzlies. They have 4 guards available today. Conchar is one of them. He's going to play significant minutes. We saw him score over 40 fantasy points just a week ago, so there's clear upside there. Melton is the better play of the two, but Conchar isn't a bad pivot.
All right. Well, you talked about the power forwards. Let's go there. Obviously, Marvin Bagley is a guy that you mentioned before. So LeBron James, though, is, again, starting just at the top of the heap, and we expect him to be out there. LeBron James, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Domantas Sabonis, DeMar DeRozan, those are your studs, all projected for 40-plus points tonight. None of them really in great spots, but obviously there's a real discrepancy in terms of the salary. You know, mid-50s for both James and Giannis, and then you get to the 38 to 41 for DeRozan and Sabonis. You could go cheaper. You could look at, maybe a John Collins, for instance, you like better than any of those guys, just based on what his price is compared to his projection. Is not a great value spot by any means, but more of a value, obviously, than those guys that we were just talking about. Are you looking to fade the studs? Do you like to fit one of them in there just because maybe you've got the room to do so with more value elsewhere?
Yeah, so there's a pretty key talking point here. And actually, we have Kay Johnson in the YouTube chat. I brought up that if you don't play Middleton tonight, you're losing money. Keep smashing with Holiday out. Well, Holiday isn't out tonight. He's listed as questionable to play, and we don't know if he's going to be in or out tonight. Right now, I think it's a true 50-50 proposition whether Holiday's in or out. If he is out, Giannis looks a lot better. And there's always upside in Giannis that never changes, but he typically plays more minutes in games that Drew Holiday's out because they just don't have that many playmakers on the roster. So we see a lot of these games without Drew Holiday. Giannis recent games, 37 minutes, 35 minutes. A game against the Warriors was a blowout, so he only played 30, but the games before that, 35 and 37 minutes. We're going to be getting somewhere around 36 minutes from Giannis if Drew Holiday's out. But if Drew plays, then you're looking at closer to 30 minutes for Giannis, and that just lowers his projection a lot. So I look at Giannis as somebody who I do want to get to not a whole bunch, but as somewhat of a priority on the high end of power forward if there is no Drew Holiday. But if Drew Holiday's in, Giannis to me is just somebody who, hey, if he's in a few lineups, I'm cool with that. He has a lot of upside, but not a priority.
So some of those cheaper guys, and again, that's relative. Obviously, we were talking about Marvin Bagley, and I'll give you a little more time to expand upon him because I know you really like him tonight. He's coming in at $14 projected for about 24 points. You could also look at Danilo Gallinari's in a good spot. Royce O'Neal, again, we can't celebrate these Jazz guys enough. Keldon Johnson at $18 is a viable play. You got minimum guys like O'Shea Brissett or Duncan Robinson, I think is in a real good spot with Tyler Hero out. Who jumps out?
Yeah, so I'll talk about Marvin Bagley, and there's a couple of reasons I like him. First of all, he missed last game, and I think people just quickly forget that Marvin Bagley was playing really well before, or at least really well from a fantasy standpoint. He kind of sucks in real life, but for fantasy, which is what we care about here, he goes out and he produces when he's on the court. So the last 2 games he started, he played 30 minutes and scored 31 Yahoo fantasy points. Game after that, he played 33 minutes. He scored 48 Yahoo fantasy points. Now, I know that was a different situation with Rashawn Holmes being out, but there's no Tyrese Halliburton, so there's a chance the Kings just play more big lineups, and that gives more minutes to Marvin Bagley. So I assume Bagley's going to move back into the starting lineup today, and as long as that is the case, I think there's a pretty good chance he plays a bunch of minutes and he scores a lot of fantasy points. And then another thing, too, is if there is a situation where they play Bagley a lot of minutes, it's probably coming, at least in some part, from Terrence Davis. So Marvin Bagley at $14, I think is a really good tournament option. He's a really good pivot play. Maybe even as of the way things stand right now, if Bagley is to start, he'd be my favorite tournament play of the day.
Bracken asking again, there's bias there on Mr. Peterson's part, but says how many Jazz is too many Jazz in my cash lineup on Yahoo?
I don't have, for cash games, I don't have like a cap where you have too many. If you're building your lineups out and you get to Conley, you get to Clarkson, Bogdanovic, Gobert in the same, like that wouldn't be an issue to me. It just kind of depends what other value ends up opening later and what ends up becoming higher priority. But at least as of now, like if you have 4 of them, it's not problematic to me.
Center position here, and about 5 minutes to go. Keep your questions coming. We'll get to as many as we can, obviously, before we do get out of here. Again, top heavy. You got Jokic, Embiid, who's been he's been good. He's not in a great spot here in this game though against the Magic. I know that sounds kind of crazy, but part of that is just that this is blowout written all over it. So who knows what his usage is going to be in the second half. Rudy Gobert, who's obviously one of those guys in a good spot for the Jazz tonight. Karl Anthony Towns in a favorable position as well. And then the list goes on from there, but I'm not sure this is, it feels like more of a mid-tier pricing kind of night at that position. What about you?
You have the salary cap to spend up for Jokic, you're doing it. Basically any slate that has him, he's going to be my highest projected player by a pretty wide margin. That's been the case all but maybe like 2 or 3 Denver slates this year. And same today. The player I've projected for the most fantasy points today is Jokic. The player I've projected for the second most fantasy points today is Giannis. And there's a 7 fantasy point gap between the two of them for me. If you have the ability to spend up for Jokic, do it. He's, to me, always the highest upside player on any given slate. But it doesn't make him my most rostered center. If I look at my current build right now, Jokic is the one I get the third most exposure to, but number 1 is Okongwu. Number 2 is Rudy Gobert. I don't know we need to rehash the same Jazz talking points over and over again.
Yeah.
But it's the same thing. There's extra usage available for the Utah Jazz without Donovan Mitchell, and as is Rudy Gobert's already a good fantasy producer. As for Okongwu, we talked earlier about some Atlanta Hawks wings and how they benefit from Bogdanovich being out, and also how there could be more small ball lineups from the Hawks because Clint Capella is out. But with Clint Capella out, Okongwu is going to start. We know that because the team confirmed that earlier in the day. The last game that we saw Okongwu start, he played 36 minutes and he scored 36 Yahoo fantasy points. He scores about a fantasy point per minute, so he's a good fantasy producer. I can't project him to play 36 minutes because his playing time is all over the place. But just the idea that he could play 36 minutes makes him the highest upside center on a points per dollar basis today.
So I'm just kind of looking at, obviously, like Okongwu. I agree with everything you just said, especially with Capella out. Okongwu is in a great spot. I'm sure he's going to do very, very well tonight. But if you're trying to make the case for either a pivot for the sake of ownership and differentiation, or maybe there's just someone that you like as much and he's not going to be as popular. Again, it's Okongwu, LaMarcus Aldridge in a really good spot tonight. Mo Bamba, the other side of that Sixers game we were talking about. You can look at Rashawn Holmes. Kevin Love is a guy who's been kind of up and down this fantasy season, sort of one of those guys similar to what you were saying before, not the best basketball player in the world anymore, but still capable of putting up fantasy numbers. Who do you like best among this group, all guys that are like 16 to 18 bucks?
So $16 to $18 at center.
Yeah.
Let's see. Who do I have?
You can expand that search a little bit.
Yeah, I was going to say it's a very narrow window that you give me.
Yeah, well, I'm looking at it because these seem to be guys that are all in good spots, and then you get like Steven Adams, Brandon Clark, guys like that, Isaiah Stewart, who don't maybe stand out as much.
Yeah, so Rashawn Holmes is one that's pretty interesting to me. Basically, on every site, we have no clue what his minutes are going to look like today. So Rashawn Holmes returned to the Kings last game. It was the first time he had played in about 3 weeks. So we hadn't seen him play since December, and he was regular starter for the Kings, played a lot of minutes, always been a good fantasy producer. Comes back, not a surprise. Long absence, comes back. He does start, but he only plays 15 minutes. He's going to play more than 15 minutes today. The question becomes, how many minutes does Rashawn Holmes play? Maybe we know that before lock, maybe we don't. But here's what is key about him. On every this is pertinent for FanDuel, Yahoo, DraftKings. He's $16 on Yahoo. He's cheap on other sites as well. And we don't know what his minutes. He could go back to regular minutes today for all we know. But he's way underpriced and nobody's playing him. That's the other key point here for tournaments. We right now have Rashawn Holmes projected for 0.1% ownership. Nobody's playing him. Same case on every site today. I think that's somebody who's worth rolling the dice on. And it's not that hard to be overweight to him. You play 150 lineups, you have Rashawn Holmes in one of them, you're massively overweight to the field on Rashawn Holmes. So I think that he's a pretty good tournament dart. And then you just kind of hope that we get close. Even if you don't get totally full minutes, 24 minutes, there's a pretty good chance he returns good value at his salary.
All right, why don't we wrap with this because we only have a couple more minutes left. You're just absolute, doesn't matter the position, doesn't matter the price point for anyone that joined us late, your absolute favorite plays tonight for Yahoo.
Yeah, so I'll go position by position, and I'll just say in the build I have right now, these are the players I have the most exposure to at each position. At point guard, it's Jordan Clarkson at $17. At shooting guard, it is Kyrie Irving at $35. Small forward is Bojan Bogdanovic at $19. A lot of guys are really close there for me. I think there's not one guy that stands out at the small forward position. above everybody else. I think Butler, Conchar, DeAndre Hunter, Bojan Bogdanovic, all pretty tight. Power forward position, something that could change for me later in the day, but at least as of now, I really like Marvin Bagley at $14 as a GPP option. I'm assuming he starts after he missed last game. If he doesn't start, then I would feel otherwise. At center, Okongwu at $17, really, really strong value option.
All right, very good. There's a lot more NBA talk coming your way over the course of this Awesemo day, because we are still a couple hours or so away from lock, 2.5 hours away. You got 4:45, so in about 15 minutes, the NBA deeper dive. Adam will be coming along, bearded Adam, with our guy Rinpack there. 4:45 to 6 to 7:30. Greg comes back with Eric. Eric's just going to be hanging on all night, and I think he might even be on for PGA Live before lock tonight with Ben, 8 to 9 o'clock. So yeah, it's just a Eric marathon starting at 4:45 Eastern time and rolling for about 4.5 hours or so. So enjoy it. He and I will be together actually in a couple of days talking NFL, looking ahead to divisional weekend. But this I don't know, Greg. It feels like one of those nights that we're far from up to date and well positioned in terms of our news. I feel like a lot's happened already today NBA wise, but so much more is still going to break in terms of creating some value before lock. So I encourage, as always, people check out the shows, listen in, and keep an eye on it, because you don't want to lock anything in at 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yeah. Also, all the more reason, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, deeper dive live before lock. Things are going to change. That is the nature of NBA DFS. So check out all the other shows we're doing today.
Very good. Thanks to Mike Awesemo, our producer, of course, Greg. I'm Adam. We appreciate you hanging out here with us. Hit the like on your way out the door. We'll see you a little bit later on.